on the back of a camel, you know, things like that. But I don't really want to stretch public credulity that much.
Do you like the medium of film? Do you like feature films?
Yes, I'm quite obsessed with feature films. I have a huge collection that I just watch and re-watch and things like that.
And so has that never tempted you to try and be part of them and be in them?
Not to be in them. Screenplays interest me very much. Dialogue interests me a great deal. But I've never been terribly interested in photography and things like that, and cameras and, you know, chemists.
Well, in Paint a Vulgar Picture, talking also about the thrill of being a young fan, one of the boys from the ugly new houses, getting a chance to touch a star. Now, you're in that position of being the star. How do you think it feels for fans to be able to get close to you?
Well, I can understand it completely, because I went through the entire experience of really, well, certainly in my case, I did worship the people that I like, the people like T-Rex and David Bowie and Roxy Music. And I went to a lot of concerts in the early 70s, 72, 73. And I would arrive really early at noon, and I would be at the stage door, and I'd wait for the coach to arrive, and just really to glimpse people stepping from the coach into the venue was something that was imprinted upon me and would never leave me. So it was a great thrill to see people close up.
Is it strange then to be the one stepping from the coach into the venue, or is it not because you understand what they're feeling?
It's not strange at all. It isn't strange at all. I can really understand it. I can.
Have you met any of your heroes now that you're in the same league in a way?
Yes, I have. I have met a few, but it's not really something now that I staunchly advise. I think it's quite nice in a way to keep the memory sealed, if you like, or the vision at least of how you see people and how you see the records they make. And also, as I get to hear anecdotes about certain records that I loved, how they were made and how awful it was and how such a person couldn't really play and they got somebody else to sing and so on, I like to cherish the memory. I like to keep it quite closed.
Do you think people, your fans, would be disappointed if they met you?
Well, I think it's hard to gauge, but I think there is a degree of disappointment because to certain people who take music so seriously and think a great deal about the artists they like, and they have an absolute concrete vision of what this person is and what this person stands for. And sometimes you meet people and you realise that it isn't really altogether true, and you've really formed your own picture that's quite personal and it's quite useful to you, but not really necessarily in line with the reality. So sometimes, and also with me, I find that people expect it to be a certain way, and if it really isn't the way that I am, I can't really just go along with it and please them. I find I really have to interrupt and say, well, no, I don't think that at all. I'm not that way. I'm not like that or whatever. So it's quite hard to juggle with that.
Well, what kind of people are hardcore Smiths fans now then in '87?
It's quite hard to assess because initially we had an audience that was totally identifiable. In 1983, certainly, it was a specific breed, but now it really seems to have spread a little.
What was the specific breed?
I think it was a specific breed of very deep people who perhaps quite feverishly liked pop music, but really hated the chart and really hated the press and really hated the notion of listening to the radio, and they just disapproved, but they in the same sense they wanted it to mean something to them. They really wanted it in their lives. So I think they were initially they were quite deep-thinking people who were quite high-principled people also.
If the audience changed radically, for instance, if you started attracting screaming young girls who weren't listening to what you were playing, would you stop doing it? Would it upset you so much?
Yes, but I don't think that would happen at all, which is obviously the easy way out of that one. But when I see certain groups who have that audience who just persistently scream and doesn't matter what the song is, let's just scream, and I find that really exhausting. It's a different world completely. Like I went to see a-ha in America, and I really liked I really liked their records. But when I saw them, and it was just really this constant, deafening squeal, not even a respectable scream, it was actually an indecent squeal, and which completely drowned out the musicians and threw them off their tracks because they seemed totally embarrassed by all these, you know, screaming girls. I thought, well, no, I wouldn't really like that.
Well, what kind of lifespan do you think the Smiths have just now? How long do you think it can go on?
It's hard to say. I can't answer that question at all. I just don't know.
Do you still feel very much that you have roots in Manchester?
Yes, I do feel that I have very strong roots in Manchester. And even though I'm not there every day, it's just something that I really can't get away from.
How do you cope with living somewhere like London, which is a much harder city to live in, I would imagine, than Manchester?
Well, I find it easy because I live in a nice place. I couldn't imagine living here if I didn't live in a nice place. I find it completely unbearable. And also, it's a horrible place to live unless you can survive financially. I would imagine it would be awful. I remember coming to London when I was 17. I moved to London as practically everybody did, and I lasted, I think it was 7 days or 8 days, but I brought everything that I possessed in these huge cases, and it was a really awful experience. So I can imagine London from that viewpoint is quite treacherous. But for me, I simply survived by really avoiding the music industry and avoiding that kerfuffle of activity, and just being quite private.
So how often do you go back to Manchester?
I go back to Manchester perhaps once a month for a weekend.
And does that recharge your batteries, or do you get something different from Manchester than you do from London?
I don't go out in Manchester either, so I don't really sense the benefits, if you like, if they be benefits of both places in that way. So being in Manchester, I just really go from one house to another, which are very mundane, but there it is nonetheless.
Well, if you don't go out to clubs and so on, when you leave the house, where is it you want to go? What do you do for leisure pursuits outside your four walls?
I don't have any. The only time I ever leave the house is to buy food.
What goes on in your house then?
What goes on in my house? Very, very little. I mean, there's I want to die. Very, very little. There's only generally me in there.
And what do you do?
I'm beginning to sound like a dirty old man. Well, I make lots of telephone calls to agencies in Soho. No. Right.